I so appreciate Senator Isaacson's comments about international health, and he is lucky enough to represent the Centers for Disease Control, which is one of the great organizations in human history that has made such a difference in health care for low-income people in this country and around the world, and frankly, not just low-income people, but for what we call public health in this country. And few achievements greater than the achievements of public health, whether it's eradicating smallpox internationally or we're both old enough, as the presiding officer may not quite be old enough, but Senator Isaacson and I are old enough to remember kids that we knew from grade school that were afflicted with polio, and the fear of every parent that their child might get polio. And it's the Centers for Disease Control and the public health system in this country which removed that threat with the Salk and Sabin vaccines and all that. I thank the senator from Georgia. Mr. President, I rise briefly today for just 4 or 5 minutes to talk about one way that companies in my state grow and create jobs, and that is by selling their products around the world. We know President Obama set a goal to double exports from the United States in the next 5 years. I'm part of the President's Advisory Council. There is a handful of senators and a few members of the House of Representatives who are part of this advisory committee with many of the many business leaders in this country, CEOs of large companies and presidents and CEOs of small companies, small businesses too, to advise the president to work on this. Earlier today, I joined with Fred Hochberg, who's president of the Export-Import Bank of the United States, and Eric Birkeland, president of the Ohio Manufacturers Association in Columbus, to discuss the need to reauthorize the Export-Import Bank. Ohio has had quicker increases in job growth than other states. We are coming back. Our unemployment rate is now lower than the national average. It's still far too high. There are far too many Ohioans that want to work that can't find jobs. There are far too many Ohioans who have jobs but aren't working full-time or whose pay has been cut or is stagnant. We know the manufacturing sector nationally has gained back some 470,000 jobs since January 2010. To put that in a little historical perspective, for 12 years in this country, from 1997 into 2010, for 12 plus years, we saw manufacturing job loss in this country every single year from the year before. Fewer factories, fewer workers in manufacturing. But since early 2010, we have seen almost every single month in Ohio and across the country, we've seen job growth in manufacturing. Not enough. It's positive, but we're not clearly out of the woods yet. I fear we take a step back if Congress fails to reauthorize the Export-Import Bank. We know that Ohio manufacturers, we know that small businesses from Zanesville to Springfield, from Ashtabula to Toledo, that small businesses can compete, American manufacturers compete with anyone in the world if there's a level playing field. We know how to make things in Ohio. When we stamp "Made in Ohio" on a product, it's a sign the item was made with pride by some of the most efficient, progressive companies in the world and some of the best workers in the world. But exporting's tough, especially for small businesses. Fewer than 1% of the nation's 25 million small businesses export their products. Very few small businesses are able to export for a whole host of reasons. I hear from small business owners who want to expand. They want to get access to foreign markets, but they can't secure private financing due to the credit risks associated with some overseas investments. One of the most important resources to help small business and mid-sized manufacturers is to boost their exports. To help them boost their exports is the Export-Import Bank. EXIM's mission is simple. It facilitates exports. It contributes to job creation in the United States. It does it through loans, through guarantees, through insurance. It fills in gaps in trade financing at no cost to taxpayers. The private market, the market sometimes doesn't deliver in these situations. The Export-Import Bank can fill in some gaps and help companies that have the ability to grow and export to actually do that. The EXIM Bank generates revenue to the U.S. Treasury, yet despite this record of success, exports and jobs are at stake because Congress cannot agree to EXIM reauthorization. The EXIM Bank's lending authority expires May 31st. We know that companies that export products create jobs, pay higher wages, and are more likely to be able to remain in business. Export-supported jobs linked to manufacturing already account for an estimated 7%, 1 out of 14 of Ohio's total private sector employment. So 1 out of 14 Ohio workers is linked to export. More than 1/4 of manufacturing workers in Ohio depend on exports for their jobs, the 8th among the 50 states. But we need to do a better job in ensuring that America's small businesses have access to that global market. The Export-Import Bank helps. It provides credit that otherwise wouldn't be available to turn export opportunities for businesses into increased jobs, higher wages, increased sales. In 2011, the bank worked with almost 100 Ohio businesses to support more than $400 million in export sales. According to the National Association of Manufacturers, EXIM supports 290,000 export-related jobs. More than 85% of EXIM's transactions supported small businesses last year. Renewing the bank's charter should be a cause that all senators support. Just like the 25 times the Senate overwhelmingly reauthorized the agency since its establishment in 1934. Think about that. Since 1934, time after time after time, this body has unanimously or overwhelmingly reauthorized, kept going the Export-Import Bank. Today, for whatever reason, perhaps the same reason that when the presiding officer's Buffett rule was on the floor of the Senate this week, a number of senators have said no to moving forward. I don't know if it's because the Republican leader has said he wants President Obama to fail. I don't know if it's just this rigid philosophy that thinks there's no positive role for government, whether it's the highway bill, whether it's the Buffett rule, or whether it's the EXIM Bank. But we know that the EXIM Bank works. It's strongly supported by the Chamber of Commerce and National Association of Manufacturers, the machinists who testified in our committee this week, in Banking Committee. It's supported by all kinds of people that want to see this economy grow. Unfortunately, a number of my colleagues think, for whatever reason, that they don't want to move forward on it. This is a matter of American jobs. It's a matter of competitiveness. We face a trade deficit with China of $295 billion in 2011, meaning we import about $800 million. Every day we buy about $800 million of goods from China, more than we sell to China. President Bush I, some years ago, said that $1 billion in exports or imports could translate it into 13,000 jobs. And when we have a $295 billion deficit with that one country alone last year, you can see the kind of job loss it means. We know that China's Export-Import and Development Bank provide as much as $100 billion in export credits each year. That's 3 times as many new export credits as the U.S. Export-Import Bank does. So we know that even with reauthorization, China still does way more of this than the United States, but we are unilaterally disarming if we allow this May 31st date to come and go and the export-import reauthorization expires. It makes no sense for our manufacturers, for our big companies, for our small companies. It makes no sense for our workers. It makes no sense for our communities that will all be hurt if we don't do that. It's time to end the delay. It's time, Mr. President, to reauthorize the Export-Import Bank. I yield the floor, and I suggest that.